In a shocking turn of events, Seth Rollins has suffered a tragic ligament fracture, forcing him out of SummerSlam 2025. But just as one door closes, another bursts open. Roman Reigns makes his long-awaited, earth-shattering return to WWE Raw after months of silence. 1 minute ago, the WWE Universe was shaken to its core. Not by a title change. Not by a backstage brawl. Not even by a betrayal. But by something far more devastating. Seth Rollins has been diagnosed with a serious ligament fracture. One that not only rules him out of SummerSlam, but may jeopardize the rest of his career. Sources close to WWE medical staff confirm it was a complete ligament rupture in the left leg, sustained during last week's brutal Raw main event against Gunther. And the timing could not be more tragic. Rollins was days away from headlining the biggest event of the summer, locked in a deeply personal war with Paul Heyman's new faction and the returning threat of Solo Sikoa. But now? The visionary has been silenced. His voice, for once, absent. His music no longer echoing through arenas. Just silence. And in the vacuum of that silence, he returned. Roman Reigns. The tribal chief. After 100 days of absence. 100 days of unspoken tension. Of betrayal. Of whispers behind closed doors. Of bloodline fractures, invasions, and wars waged in his name, Roman walked back into the ring, and the world stopped. He didn't say a word. Not at first. He didn't need to. His eyes, locked on Paul Heyman, said everything. And for the first time in years, Heyman, WWE's mastermind, the puppet master of champions, looked rattled. His voice, always so sharp, trembled when he whispered the name. Roman. But even as Roman Reigns made his epic return to Monday Night Raw, clad in black, his expression unreadable, his comeback was overshadowed by the news no one expected. Seth Rollins, his brother-in-arms, his fiercest rival, and perhaps his only true equal, was in the hospital. And Roman's first question backstage wasn't about titles, or factions, or SummerSlam. It was 4 quiet words. Where is Seth now? The answer came in the form of a leaked report from a Florida orthopedic surgeon. The injury was worse than initially believed. It wasn't just a sprain. It was a full rupture of the anterior cruciate ligament, paired with partial damage to surrounding ligaments and a massive swelling around the joint. Surgery was imminent. Recovery? Uncertain. At least 6 months. Maybe more. The WWE locker room was in shock. Medical staff, who initially downplayed the severity, were reportedly stunned when Rollins collapsed backstage after Raw, unable to put weight on the leg. But no one was more affected than Paul Heyman. The same man who stood beside Seth Rollins in his war against Solo Sikoa. The same man who handpicked Rollins as the face of a new future. He was seen pacing the halls of the WWE Performance Center the morning after the news broke. Eyewitnesses say he was on the phone for hours, sometimes shouting, sometimes silent. One staffer recalled him muttering to himself over and over again, "This wasn't supposed to happen." Not to him. But the truth? The signs had been there. Rollins had wrestled through pain for months. Knee braces hidden under tights. Ice packs backstage. Quiet conversations with trainers. And a growing list of nights when he limped out of arenas after matches that pushed him beyond human limits. He was holding himself together with tape and adrenaline, one source admitted. But we all knew it couldn't last. And now, the consequences had come crashing in. Paul Heyman, devastated. Roman Reigns, silently watching. And the man at the center of it all, lying in a hospital bed, unable to walk. It was then that the cameras caught a moment no one was supposed to see. Paul Heyman, standing outside Seth Rollins' hospital room, staring at the door, his hand frozen mid-knock. He didn't go in. He couldn't. When asked why, he simply said, "I don't know if he wants to see me. Not after this." But Roman Reigns? He did go in. Not as a rival. Not as the tribal chief. As something else. As a man who knew what it felt like to be betrayed. To be broken. To be forgotten by the people who once called you family. A nurse who was present during the visit later recounted. He sat by the bed and didn't say anything for the longest time. Just looked at Seth. Then he whispered, "I didn't want it to end like this." Seth didn't respond. He was heavily sedated, still recovering from surgery. But the emotional weight of that moment was undeniable. For years, their story had been war. From the Shield to WrestleMania. From brothers to enemies to uneasy allies. But now? There was nothing left to fight for. Not tonight. And in that stillness, Roman stood. Turned. And left the hospital without a word. Later that night, backstage at Raw, Roman finally spoke. Not on the microphone. Not to the audience. But to a WWE producer, overheard just off camera. He said, "I came back for war. But maybe I was too late." The weight of it lingered. And that's when things got more complicated. Because word had begun to spread that this wasn't just about a torn ligament. That Rollins' collapse may have been triggered by emotional stress. That Paul Heyman had confronted him earlier that night, off camera, accusing him of hiding his injury, of jeopardizing the faction's credibility, of weakening the movement. That words were exchanged. That something broke. He snapped, said one source. Not in anger. In grief. Seth sat down, put his hands over his face, and whispered, "I can't carry this anymore." Then he collapsed. The rumors spiraled. That Rollins had been hiding more than a physical injury. That emotionally, he had been unraveling. That the pressure of being the locker room leader, the icon, the architect, it had all become too much. And that maybe, just maybe, he hadn't been okay for a long time. When the news reached Becky Lynch, who was preparing for her own storyline push in the women's division, she immediately canceled her appearances. She was seen leaving the hotel in tears. She didn't comment. She didn't need to. It was all unraveling. Roman's return. Seth's collapse. Paul Heyman's guilt. And in the shadows of all this chaos, Solo Sikoa remained silent. Watching. Waiting. Because with Seth Rollins out, the door was open. For domination. For control. For revenge. But tonight wasn't about the war. It was about the man. The one who had given everything to WWE, to the fans, to the legacy of professional wrestling, and now lay in a hospital bed, unable to stand. And for once, not even the tribal chief could fix it. At least, not yet. Roman Reigns was seen boarding a private jet hours after Raw ended. The destination was not confirmed. But sources say he had one request: "Tell me when Seth wakes up. I want to be there." And somewhere in a private hospital room, under low lights, Seth Rollins stirred. Eyes opening. No spotlight. No cameras. Just a whisper to the nurse nearby, "Did he come?" She nodded. Seth closed his eyes. And for the first time in a long time, he let the tears fall. Not because of the pain. But because someone came back. Because someone cared. And because somewhere in the chaos of broken ligaments, broken egos, and broken dreams, there was still something left to fight for. But not in the ring. Not tonight. This fight was for healing. For redemption. For peace. And as the world waited for the next chapter, the message was clear. The war isn't over. But for now, the architect must rebuild himself. The silence after Seth Rollins' hospitalization didn't last. Within 48 hours, it was shattered by a storm of reactions, headlines, and the most unexpected confrontation in WWE since Roman Reigns first declared himself the tribal chief. Because when Roman returned to Raw that night, he didn't return alone. He returned with questions. With anger. And with a message: one not for the WWE Universe, not even for the Bloodline, but for Paul Heyman. Backstage, in a dimly lit corridor near gorilla position, Roman cornered Heyman for the first time since WrestleMania. The cameras didn't catch it all. Just fragments. Shadows on the wall. A brief shot of Roman grabbing Heyman by the collar. And 4 words caught clearly on a hot mic: "This is your fault." For a moment, Paul Heyman didn't respond. His lips quivered. His eyes welled with panic, not because Roman had returned, but because for the first time, he no longer knew which side he was on. He had chosen Seth Rollins. He had said it was for strategy. For survival. For legacy. But deep down, even Heyman knew, it was about revenge. Revenge for being humiliated. For being cast aside when Roman disappeared after Elimination Chamber. For watching Solo Sikoa rise and take everything. And now? That revenge had come at a cost. Seth Rollins wasn't just the face of the resistance. He was Heyman's lifeline. The only man left in WWE who still respected his vision, who still believed that purpose could be found in chaos. And now he was gone. Broken. Bandaged. Sedated. And Paul Heyman was alone again. Roman didn't say another word. He let go. Stepped back. And stared into Heyman's eyes, not with fury, but with disappointment. Then came a whisper, quiet and cutting: "I warned you." The look on Heyman's face was unmistakable, the expression of a man who had gambled everything, and lost. That night on Raw, WWE didn't play a single segment hyping SummerSlam. No match graphics. No contract signings. Instead, they aired a short black and white package, Seth Rollins, from earlier in the year, backstage. Laughing. Stretching. Talking to the crew. And then, a final frame. The words in simple white font: "Get well soon, champ." No pyro. No theme. Just silence. The crowd stood. And for the first time in years, an arena full of WWE fans gave Seth Rollins the only thing he'd never asked for, but always deserved: respect. But not everyone saw it that way. Because while the world mourned the visionary's absence, Solo Sikoa made his move. At the top of the second hour, Solo appeared on the Titantron, not live, but from an undisclosed location. A smoky room. A single hanging light bulb. And in his hand? The WWE Championship contract Seth Rollins was supposed to sign at SummerSlam. Solo looked into the camera, and in a voice colder than ever, said, "The war's not over. It's just begun. And now that the king has fallen, the throne is mine." That clip sent WWE into a tailspin. Triple H was said to be furious backstage. Producers scrambled to figure out if the contract Solo held was real. Was it stolen? Leaked? Or a bluff? No one knew. But one man wasn't asking questions. Roman Reigns. He was already on the move. And by night's end, he made it clear, this wasn't Solo's moment. It was his. The final segment of Raw wasn't advertised. No music. Just lights dimming. Then, Roman's voice. Low. Measured. A rare live mic promo. The camera opened to him standing alone in the ring. No pyro. No Paul Heyman. No Usos. No bloodline. Just Roman Reigns. A chair. And something else. Seth Rollins' armband. The very one Rollins wore on his left wrist during his final match before the collapse. Roman held it in his hand. Looked down at it. And began. "I was gone because I needed to see what would happen when I wasn't around. And you know what I saw?" Pause. "I saw people pretending to lead. I saw snakes whispering into king's ears. And I saw my brother, broken." He turned to the hard camera. "Seth Rollins, if you're watching this, I know we've bled together. I know we've torn each other apart. But let me make one thing clear, you deserved better. The arena erupted. Fans cheered not for the return of a heel, but for the rare glimpse of a man stepping out from the myth. Roman stared into the distance, then added, and now that I'm back, nobody else gets hurt on my watch. Backstage, Paul Heyman was seen watching on a monitor, tears in his eyes. Not because of guilt. Not anymore. Because he knew what came next. Roman wasn't just back. He was coming for everyone. But before the next chapter could begin, another scene was unfolding. In a quiet hospital room in Orlando, Florida. Seth Rollins had just woken up after his second post-surgical sedation. And the nurse said, "You have a visitor." At first, he assumed it was Becky. But when the door creaked open, it wasn't her. It was Triple H. No cameras. No suit. Just jeans. A hoodie. And a weight in his eyes Rollins had never seen before. He sat down. Said nothing at first. Then quietly muttered, "You didn't have to carry it all, Seth." Rollins didn't reply. But a single tear rolled down his face. Because deep down, he knew the truth. He had tried to carry too much. The company. The locker room. The war with the bloodline. And in doing so, he'd broken himself. Now the pieces were everywhere. Roman. Heyman. Solo. Even Becky, now torn between motherhood, her husband's health, and the shadow of a future that suddenly looked uncertain. But the biggest question remained. What happens to SummerSlam now? Seth Rollins was out. Solo Sikoa wanted in. Roman Reigns had returned. And Paul Heyman? He was no longer the architect of empires. He was now the man watching the empire fall apart, brick by brick. And in the distance, across that fractured landscape, the final war was just beginning. By the time SmackDown aired that Friday night, the air inside the arena felt different. Thick with anticipation. Fans weren't chanting. They weren't cheering. They were waiting. Waiting for what they knew was coming. Because while Seth Rollins was still in recovery, his absence had triggered something darker, an unraveling of control, of power, and of purpose. And at the center of it all, standing tall on the entrance ramp, was Solo Sikoa. But this wasn't the Solo the WWE Universe had known just weeks ago. Gone was the silent enforcer in black track pants. Now, he wore tailored gear, a bloodline vest stripped of all symbolism but marked with one name across the back, Sikoa. Just Sikoa. No tribal chief. No alliance. No allegiance. He was making his own statement. And as he walked to the ring, alone, deliberate, fearless, the crowd didn't boo. They didn't know whether to. Because something in his presence had shifted. And then he spoke. Words from a man who had stayed silent for far too long. Seth Rollins is gone. And Roman Reigns? He's not the same man who left. He paced, slowly. The bloodline used to mean something. Loyalty. Legacy. War. But now? He pointed to the camera. It's time for new blood. It's time for a new throne. And just like that, he placed the WWE Championship contract onto the mat in front of him. Then stepped on it. I don't need a signature. I'm declaring war. At SummerSlam, whether Rollins can walk or not, I'm taking everything. The arena erupted. Shock. Confusion. Rage. Chants of "You're not him," and "We want Roman." But Solo didn't flinch. Because deep down, he knew something no one else did. Roman wasn't coming to save this. Not yet. Backstage, chaos unfolded. Producers were yelling. Triple H was seen storming out of his office, flanked by Shawn Michaels and two referees. And then the unexpected happened. Paul Heyman walked out. Microphone in hand. Suit jacket wrinkled. Tie undone. hair more disheveled than usual. But his voice was still there. Still commanding. Still shaking with passion. Solo Sikoa has officially lost his mind. The crowd popped. Heyman continued, now walking toward the ring. You don't declare title matches. You don't step on championship contracts. And you do not disrespect the legacy that Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns built with their blood. Solo stared him down. But Heyman didn't stop. You talk about thrones? That throne was never yours. You didn't earn it. You inherited it. And now, without Seth, without Roman, you're nothing but a tyrant with no kingdom. That's when the shift happened. Solo walked toward Heyman slowly, step by step, and the camera caught it. Heyman trembled. And just as Solo raised his hand, the lights cut out. The crowd roared. A single spotlight hit the stage. And in that light, Roman Reigns. This time in full gear. Tactical vest. Boots. Eyes burning. He didn't storm down. He didn't pose. He just walked. Measured. Slow. Every step a message. Paul Heyman backed away instinctively. Solo didn't. He stood his ground. The two men faced off in the center of the ring. No words. Just tension. Roman looked down at the trampled contract between them. Then looked up at Solo. You don't speak for this family, Roman finally said. Not anymore. Solo smirked. The kind of smirk that only comes from a man who no longer fears consequence. What family? He asked. You lost it the moment you walked away. Roman didn't flinch. But the hurt was real. Visible. That line, what family? Cut deeper than any steel chair ever could. And for the first time, the audience saw it. This wasn't just about gold. This was about something far more sacred: control. Legacy. Brotherhood. Blood. Suddenly, Paul Heyman stepped between them, raising both arms. Enough. His voice cracked. You're tearing it all apart. Seth's in a hospital. SummerSlam is in chaos. And now the only two men who could save this company are ready to destroy each other over a title. He turned to Roman. You said you came back to protect. He turned to Solo. You said you were the future. Then he whispered the one sentence that no one expected to hear, then prove it. In the ring. At SummerSlam. One-on-one. The crowd went silent. Roman didn't react. Solo didn't blink. And Paul Heyman, once again, had drawn the battle lines. But this time, he wasn't managing anyone. He was praying they didn't kill each other. Moments later, the official WWE account posted the update, breaking: SummerSlam main event changed. Solo Sikoa vs. Roman Reigns, Bloodline rules. Seth Rollins will not compete. That night, Roman left the arena alone. He didn't speak to Heyman. He didn't comment on the match. He just stepped into a car, looked at the driver, and whispered one word: home. Because before he went to war, he needed to see Seth. Sources confirm Roman traveled that weekend to the Florida clinic. No press. No entourage. Just a former champion, walking into a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and silence. Seth Rollins was awake. Bandaged. Bruised. But conscious. Roman sat beside the bed. Neither spoke. Until finally, Rollins broke the silence. So, you're fighting my war now? Roman smirked. Your war was mine before you knew it. They both laughed softly. It hurt Seth to smile. But he did anyway. You gonna win? He asked. Roman paused. Then said, only if you forgive me. Seth didn't answer. But he didn't turn away either. And that, just that, was enough. Because SummerSlam was now bigger than a title. It was about what happens when gods fall, when legacies crack, and when family forgets what it was built on. And in the ring, two brothers would clash, not over gold, but over everything that had been lost. SummerSlam. The grandest party of the summer had arrived, but this year, there was no celebration. No pyrotechnics could mask the weight of what was coming. No video package could soften the blow of what had already been lost. Because the main event wasn't a championship showcase. It was a war. Roman Reigns vs. Solo Sikoa. Bloodline rules. No disqualifications. No countouts. No interference, unless it came from your family. And for the first time in a decade, Seth Rollins wouldn't be walking down that ramp. His music wouldn't echo across the stadium. His swagger, his shout of "burn it down," all absent. Because Seth was in a hospital bed, fighting a different kind of battle. But his presence lingered over everything. His name whispered in the hallways. His legacy reflected in every camera shot of Roman, every defiant stare from Solo. Because this wasn't just about power. This was about pain. About the cost of loyalty. And when the opening bell rang, it didn't sound like the start of a match. It sounded like the shattering of history. The ring wasn't just a battleground. It was a graveyard of everything the bloodline used to be. Roman came out first. Slow. Deliberate. Draped in black. No Usos. No music. Just the sound of thunder from a crowd unsure if they were watching a hero or a villain return home. Solo followed, equally alone. But his energy was different. Ferocious. He didn't stop to pose. He didn't look left or right. He walked straight to Roman. And didn't wait for introductions. He swung first. A right hand. Then another. Then a flurry that drove Roman to the corner. The tribal chief was on the defensive in seconds. And just like that, the match was on. No slow build. No grapples. Just war. Chairs flew. Steel steps crashed. The barricade shattered in the first 10 minutes. But it wasn't the brutality that stunned the crowd. It was the emotion. The screaming. The yelling. Roman, shouting, "You were my brother." Solo, roaring back, "Then why did you leave me?" At one point, Roman had Solo down. He grabbed the steel chair and raised it above his head, ready to strike. But he paused. He hesitated. And in that hesitation, Solo spit in his face. Crack. A super kick from Solo landed flush. Roman staggered. Then, Samoan spike. Roman fell like a tree. The crowd gasped. For the first time in years, Roman Reigns wasn't dominating. He was surviving. Barely. The referee checked on him. Solo snarled, grabbing Roman by the hair, whispering something the cameras couldn't hear. But one mic near ringside caught the edge of the sentence, "This was supposed to be mine. You made it yours." And suddenly, Paul Heyman appeared. Not at ringside. At the top of the stage. Drenched in sweat. His hands trembled. He had no microphone. Just a towel in his hand. The camera zoomed in. Heyman's eyes met Roman's, then Solo's. The crowd fell silent. They knew what this was. This wasn't a promo. This was the moment a manager chose between kings. And then, slowly, achingly, Paul Heyman threw the towel. Not in the ring. But on the ramp. Halfway. Halfway to Solo. Halfway to Roman. He dropped it between them. The signal was clear. "I'm done choosing." In the ring, Solo looked up at Heyman with pure rage. Roman sat up. Bleeding. Breathing. Still alive. And now? Now the emotion shifted. Because Solo realized something, Paul Heyman wasn't picking either side. He was leaving. The man who had guided Brock Lesnar, built Roman Reigns, and tried to salvage Solo's rise, was walking away. He disappeared behind the curtain. And in the chaos of that heartbreak, Roman struck. Spear. Brutal. Final. 1, 2, 3. It was over. But the silence afterward didn't feel like victory. Roman collapsed. Solo lay still. And the commentary team didn't scream he did it. They whispered. Because something sacred had just ended. Roman Reigns had won, but it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like tragedy. The crowd didn't boo. They didn't cheer. They stood. Quiet. Because what they had just witnessed wasn't a title defense. It was the final gasp of a family torn apart. Later that night, cameras caught Roman backstage. Alone. Wrapped in ice. Blood dried on his forehead. And then, a knock. Not loud. Just a soft tap. He looked up. And there, in the doorway, Becky Lynch. No words. Just her holding a phone. She handed it to him. Roman took it. On the screen? Seth Rollins. Bandaged. Weak. But awake. Roman stared into the camera. Seth managed a smirk. Told you you'd need me to carry it one day. Roman chuckled. A tired, broken chuckle. Then whispered, I didn't carry it. I buried it. And Seth, quiet, replied. Then start building. The screen went black. And with that, the next chapter of WWE began. One where thrones didn't matter. Where empires were rebuilt not with gold, but with forgiveness. But that would take time. Because tonight, the war was over. And what was left was the ruins of the bloodline. The morning after SummerSlam, WWE headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut, was silent. Not because of celebration. But because no one knew what to do next. Roman Reigns had defeated Solo Sikoa. But he hadn't restored the bloodline. He hadn't reasserted dominance. He hadn't silenced critics. He had done something no one expected, he'd walked away. Immediately after his win, Roman Reigns left the building. No media appearance. No backstage interview. No curtain call. Just a quiet exit through the loading dock, past the production trucks, into the night. No championship raised. No message delivered. Just a battered king carrying the weight of a kingdom that no longer existed. And behind him? Paul Heyman was gone. Vanished. No social media posts. No press conference. No word. Just a vacant locker and a single item left on the table in his dressing room, an old photograph of the Shield, printed and framed. Seth, Roman, and Dean, before the scars. Before the betrayals. Scrawled on the back in Heyman's handwriting, I tried to protect what we had. But it was never mine to fix. Triple H reportedly found it hours later. He sat alone in Heyman's vacant chair, reading it over and over again. And then quietly made a decision. He called the one person who hadn't spoken publicly since SummerSlam. Seth Rollins. Still hospitalized. Still recovering. Still silent. Until now. The phone call lasted only 3 minutes. But when it ended, WWE posted a statement, breaking, Seth Rollins to appear via live satellite on Monday Night Raw to address Roman Reigns, Paul Heyman, and the future of WWE. The news lit up the wrestling world. Fans wondered what he would say. Would he retire? Would he lash out? Would he forgive? Nobody knew. But backstage, Roman Reigns was watching. He had flown back to Pensacola. No press. No WWE presence. Just family. His real family. The ones not touched by the ring. And in that quiet space, he did something few expected, he trained. Not for a match, but for purpose. Every morning, 5 a.m., alone in his garage. Heavy bag. Ropes. Silence. He wasn't prepping for a fight. He was trying to find the man who had gotten lost in all the championship gold. Because deep down, Roman knew the truth, he had broken the people he once called family. And now? He didn't want the tribal chief. He wanted to be Roman Reigns again. Raw arrived. The arena was packed. But it wasn't the usual noise. It was different. Like a church before confession. The lights dimmed. And on the Titantron appeared Seth Rollins. Seated. Shoulders taped. Eyes tired. But alert. The crowd erupted. And then grew silent as Seth raised his hand. He took a breath. Then began. You ever give everything to something, and still watch it fall apart? He leaned forward. That's what it feels like right now. Like I gave my body, my soul, my loyalty, and in the end, I collapsed in a hallway no one saw. And when I opened my eyes, the world had changed. He paused. The audience hung on every word. People keep asking what I think of Roman. What I think of Heyman. What I think of Solo. You know what I think? He nodded slowly. I think they're all scared. Because for the first time, they saw what happens when the armor cracks. They saw the real cost of playing God. A long silence. Then, his voice cracked. And so did I. He looked down. Then back up, fire flickering behind his eyes. But here's the thing about pain, it wakes you up. The crowd popped. So I'm not done. Not yet. Not by a long shot. When I can walk again, when I can fight again. I'm coming back. And I'm not coming back to save anyone. I'm coming back, to finish what we started. The screen faded. But the message burned. Seth Rollins was still in this. In the shadows of that declaration, Roman watched. Alone in his garage. Eyes fixed on the screen. He didn't smile. Didn't flinch. Just stared. And then? He whispered, so am I. That night, WWE social media exploded. Fan theories. Faction dream matchups. The return of the Shield? The rebirth of the bloodline? Or something new? But in reality, no one knew what was coming. Because backstage, Triple H was making quiet moves. Pulling talent from NXT. Calling in favors from veterans. Drafting a new chapter. One built not on dominance or betrayal. But on consequences. And Roman? He was waiting. Not for a fight. But for a conversation. With Seth. One they had both avoided for too long. Sources confirmed that WWE executives were organizing a private sit-down segment. No audience, no microphones, just 2 chairs and 2 men. Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins. Face to face. The date wasn't announced. But the tagline leaked through internal memos. Just 2 words, the reckoning. And somewhere in a quiet hotel room, Paul Heyman read the headline. He closed his laptop. And smiled. Because the empire had burned. But maybe, just maybe, the architects were ready to build again.